What's the meaning of life? You've probably asked it before brushing your teeth, staring out a window, wondering why life feels empty even when nothing is wrong. It's a question that sneaks in, not when you're at rock bottom, but in those moments where everything should feel perfect. Yet somehow doesn't. We imagine meaning will reveal itself once we succeed, once we have enough love, money, respect, or comfort. But Leo Tolstoy's story shows the opposite. He had it all: fame as the author of war, and peace, wealth, a beautiful estate, a large family, and more acclaim than most writers could dream of. And still, at the peak of his success, a terrifying thought gripped him. What if none of this truly matters? One day, seemingly out of nowhere, he began to unravel. He wasn't suffering tragedy. He wasn't destitute. Life for Tolstoy was soft, secure, and celebrated. Yet that was the problem. He reached the mountaintop and found only fog, no revelation, no peace. Just a gnawing question that wouldn't leave. Is there any meaning in my life that death cannot destroy? The man who gave the world one of its greatest novels couldn't find a reason to keep living. He described it as a spiritual illness. It didn't strike like lightning. It seeped in slowly. He stopped wanting to write. Joy dulled. His long walks turned into quiet spirals of dread. His family noticed, servants whispered. But no one could understand how the applause of the world had become deafening and utterly empty. Tolstoy's crisis wasn't rare. It's the same quiet question that haunts countless lives today: influencers, entrepreneurs, even ordinary people who do everything right, hit every milestone, only to ask in the stillness, now what? This is where his journey begins, not with easy answers, not with success as a solution, but with the courage to stare into the void of existence and say, I am not looking away. Tolstoy tried to outrun despair the only way he knew how: by thinking his way out of it. If his life felt meaningless, surely there had to be a philosophy, a doctrine, an idea that could explain why life is worth living. So he buried himself in books. He devoured science, philosophy, religion. He read the brightest minds of his time, searching for a single argument that could silence the question echoing in his head. But every answer collapsed under scrutiny. Science explained how things worked, but not why they mattered. Philosophy mapped out reason, but couldn't tell him why he should keep breathing when all breaths end in death. The more he read, the darker it got. One thought circled endlessly. If life is guaranteed to end, how can anything inside it hold meaning? He compared existence to a candle flickering in an endless night: brief, fragile, doomed to vanish, leaving no trace. That image haunted him. It wasn't drama, it was dread, a deep bone-cold terror that every love, every success, every moment would one day be erased. And then he noticed something strange. The peasants who worked his fields, the men and women with calloused hands and hard lives, didn't seem crushed by this question. They had far less comfort, fewer books, no status, and yet they carried a quiet certainty that he lacked. Their days were hard, but their hearts seemed steady. They lived as if life had meaning baked into its fabric, needing no proof. Tolstoy envied that quiet faith. When he asked the learned elite, they gave him logic. When he observed the humble, he saw a conviction that life itself was enough, no philosophy degree required. And for the first time he wondered, maybe meaning is unturned, maybe it's lived. But that question didn't free him. It left him restless, staring at his own life like it was a stranger's. If truth wasn't in books or brilliance, what had he been chasing all these years? And what would he have to give up to finally feel the meaning the peasants seemed to hold so easily? Tolstoy couldn't go back to life as it was. Once you've seen the cracks in everything you've built, pretending they aren't there feels like suffocating. He began to strip his life down piece by piece, convinced that meaning could only come from living closer to truth, not comfort. He gave away much of his wealth. He swapped fine clothes for rougher ones. He started working in the fields beside the peasants he once watched from a distance. It wasn't for show. It was desperation, a hope that humility and simplicity could stitch his fractured soul back together. But shedding privilege didn't make the storm vanish. At home, his wife Sophia was confused, then furious. This wasn't the man she had married, the celebrated author with a legacy to build and an estate to maintain. Their home, once grand and steady, turned tense and fractured. Arguments flared. She felt abandoned, he felt misunderstood. He wanted to save his soul, she wanted to save their family, and still, the question wouldn't let him go. What is worth living for? If love, family, and brilliance can't quiet the fear of meaninglessness, what can? He tried religion but found rituals empty. He tried morality but couldn't shake the shadow of death that made every rule feel temporary. Night after night, he sat in silence, searching for a conviction that wouldn't collapse. His writing changed too. The man who once poured himself into epic novels could hardly bring himself to write. He feared every word was another mask, another way to avoid the truth. His journals from this time read like a man wrestling with himself, begging for a reason to live beyond survival, beyond applause, beyond fear. And yet, even in this chaos, something was shifting. The more he peeled away false securities, the more he sensed that meaning wasn't hiding out there waiting to be found. It might already be inside, quiet, fragile, waiting for him to live differently enough to see it. But to truly understand what that meant, Tolstoy would have to take his search to the edge of life itself and face what waited for him on the other side of despair. In his final years, Tolstoy's life looked nothing like the grand success story he once lived. The applause of the world still followed him, but it felt meaningless compared to the quiet truths he had stumbled toward. He had stripped away wealth, pride, and accolades, yet meaning still felt fragile like a candle he had to shield from every gust of doubt. His search led him to one final realization: meaning isn't given, it's built. Not by fame or power, but by how you live each moment, how you love, how you serve, how you choose courage even when death waits at the end. Meaning was never hidden in the grand gestures. It was in the smallest acts of honesty, kindness, and purpose, the kind no one applauds but that change you from the inside out. But this truth came with a cost. His marriage fractured under the weight of his transformation. Late in life, he left home entirely, an old man boarding a train alone, still searching for clarity, for freedom, for a faith he could hold on to without betraying himself. Days later, sick and weak, he collapsed at a remote train station. As he lay dying, the world's cameras and headlines closed in, but he no longer seemed to care. The meaning he had sought all his life wasn't a word, a book, or a title. It was simply this: to live in a way that death could not erase. Tolstoy's story is not one of easy answers. It's a map drawn in blood, tears, and questions we still wrestle with today. He showed that having everything can still leave you empty, and losing everything might finally teach you what matters. And maybe that is the challenge for us: to stop waiting for meaning to arrive like a reward, and start building it quietly, daily, in the way we love and live, to choose the kind of life that even death cannot make meaningless. Remember, meaning isn't found, it's created moment by moment. The ones who understand that deeply tend to stay, listen, reflect. And yes, they usually click subscribe. That's it for now.